First of all, Benjamin's a really hard act to follow, so thanks for this fantastic time slot. Nothing that we're going to look at involves anything in the metaverse, so apologies if you want to leave right now. I totally understand. What we are going to talk about, though, is what we've been up to for the last year. And, really Panera has been a bit of, I guess, a quiet innovator in experience design for a really long time. So Panera was on the forefront of drive-thru, of kiosk integration, of loyalty app in fast casual, I think, long before a lot of other brands started coming along. So we really saw and kind of had a sense of consumer behaviors shifting before COVID hit. And then, of course, that, like everything else and everybody else in this room, really accelerated how we wanted to usher along, rethinking that experience design. And I think the biggest takeaway for us, because really, this is no secret, everything we're talking about here, every single person in this room is dealing with the same problems. I think for us, we had the added challenge of also re-examining, or at least taking the opportunity to ask the question of, is our on-premise experience doing everything that we wanted it to do? This very much, and I think the theme throughout this time here that we're going to talk about is that this isn't just an exercise in how to integrate off-premise or how to integrate drive-thru better or how to deal with everybody that's enjoying their meals not on site. It's also about how to make this a much more compelling interior experience. And as you can see here, we had a lot of work to do. So Jamie will get into quite a bit of that.
Yeah, so this required, just more than artwork and finishes. We really wanted to look at and challenge the role of the box itself and figure out how we can, build it for change. Over the past couple of years, if it's taught us anything, we know that is inevitable. And so how we look at those experiences and start to think about how you can build that flex into those was really key. And then second, to create experiences that matter, ones that were rooted in what the Panera customer just really knew and loved about the brand, but also reimagined for a younger generation, just to see how we can start to bring some of those customers in. And then finally, as Juliana kind of mentioned, taking convenience beyond the drive-thru. That was definitely a tool in the toolkit, but it was not going to optimize on convenience, especially for Panera that has such a complex menu and customization. You're just going to be waiting longer in a drive-thru. So convenience really needed to be taken to another level. I think, so why? So I think we've heard multiple times already throughout this conference that restaurant brands, they've historically been siloed. You have your QSR, fast casual, or casual dine. But as we know today, restaurants can pretty much be anywhere, nowhere, and everywhere in between. And for Panera especially, they had to think past, just because you might be categorized as a fast casual brand, your competitors are QSR, your customers are not really defining you in that way. And so the expectations there are, I want to get the food that I want, when I want it, and how I want it. And so we've just seen such an explosion. And so luckily we had set some of that groundwork in place, but it's crazy to see how much online delivery has increased, I think, as we all know. And then 52% of global consumers are now embracing ghost kitchens, which is kind of unheard of from where we were just, a few years back. And then, of course, you have this swipe for new digital customer that has taught us we need to stay on our toes. It is brand loyalty is not a given, and consumers are looking for what is new and what is next. And so to keep them engaged, we have to keep a fresh and new experience, throughout. So that was, it was interesting too, as we spoke pretty early on in the process, is that I think that 10-year prototype is pretty much dead. As we look towards the future, how can we start to build our box for change in the end?
And this really does go back to looking at the on-premise experience and the off-premise experience as what they are. They're not the same thing. You don't just cut a hole in the side of the building and there's your drive-through, or you don't just put a shelf in the dining room and there's your customer pickup. And so when we started to look at how these journeys are laid out in the store, and there's, Jamie's going to go into quite a bit about what we were doing to orchestrate that, we were really thoughtful about not just placing shelves for convenience of our associates or just for convenience of our guests, but what are we asking people to do when they come in? So in this instance, you can see that the kiosk and the POS customer journey are really pretty identical. But it's also very carefully orchestrated. Nobody coming into this restaurant can do so without marching right past this bakery case that we're going to look at later, which was a huge, huge change for us. So this is as much about experience as it is about convenience. Our third-party delivery drivers, they're our customers as well. So we built in a layout that makes it easy for the drivers to get in and out fast. We want to constantly recruit the best drivers. It's good for business. It's good for us. They're our representatives. So, we really looked at each one of these as solving a very unique problem instead of just solving, an easy problem.
Yeah.
And then we tested these assumptions and then tried to break them over and over and over again. So we built a full-scale mock-up of the restaurant in a warehouse and filled it in front of house, back of house, the whole nine. And, it's really important to know that this was not a design exercise. This wasn't just the development team going in and having fun and blowing a lot of money on a cardboard restaurant. It was a cross-functional endeavor. And I think we were able to develop it as quickly as we did because we were really diligent about seeking feedback, insights, input, asking people to be, kind of brutal about telling us what they thought did and didn't work. And we did break a number of our assumptions and change things and made adjustments before we launched our first pilot site. And really, I think that, it comes down to building out experiences that people care about, not just convenience.
Yep.
Eduardo Lutz, who's our Chief Brand and Concept Marketing Officer, really put it best when he said that we were doubling down on experience. And this is not just an exercise in having a smaller footprint, solving a business problem. Oh, can you hear me? Yep. It wasn't just about convenience or reducing size. It really is about becoming better at the things that we already did well and maybe some of the ones that we didn't do so well.
Yeah, so we had some design principles that we aligned to pretty early on. The first was this idea of a branded approach. There was a branding that had previously been developed, and we found some ways to bring it to life in a bigger way within the cafe, but also start to weave some opportunities for brand storytelling into the cafes. And that may not seem like a big idea, but I think for Panera, especially as you go to the cafes, brand just really doesn't play a big role. They had opted in the past for finishes and colors that created a kind of cozy home vibe, but it didn't feel like
That's
a Panera home.
It's a generous description.
So bringing the brand to life in an impactful way was really key. And then, bakery forward, the bakery had always been at the back of house. And so bringing that forward and really celebrating it, that is really one of the true differentiators for the Panera brand. So that was exciting. And then transparency, I think sometimes always a overused word, but it was a pillar to, Panera's food philosophy, as food as it should be, and, all of their commitment to reducing carbon footprint, or even more recently in the leadership in the Cool Foods program. So now we had an opportunity to allow that to come to life into the experience, to open up the kitchen, open up views into the bakery as well, and also just break down some of the barriers between the customer and the associate to start to help some of that, human connection, as, Eduardo's quote had mentioned. And then, of course, throughout this idea of Panera warmth, I think that was, I don't know how many times I heard that in stakeholder interviews and how customers would even describe the experience. So we needed to bake that in, pun intended, and
So bad.
and also, just to figure out how we could reimagine that, though, in a new and modern way. So now we'll get into the shots, what we're all waiting for. So starting at the exterior, as you can see from a brand standpoint, we have the signature brand towers that are not only at that entry point into the dining room, but also you'll see later in the drive-thru, layering not only the Panera green, but some other greens just to give it some more energy. And then really surrounding that, providing that texture, the materiality, bringing that kind of Panera warmth to the exterior. But, I think at night, what starts to happen is that interior becomes the billboard. So you can see right in almost like a window frame box that frames out the bakery, the digital menu boards, which were another new addition to the cafe. And then I think one of probably our favorite features was the lighting throughout. So we had this vision pretty early of this idea of baking at dawn. And so trying to help that come through in the space with this wash of lighting. You also see it in the inside with the cove. So as we go inside is, again, continuing that texture and the warmth. And as Juliana had mentioned, as we thought about the journey, really separating out that kiosk from the rest of the dining space and putting it on a feature wall. And then above, we have digital screens that allowed the opportunity to talk about food stories or new menu items. It wasn't just another, digital menu board, but I think the beauty of that is that you can see that throughout the entire space. We're in a much smaller square footage of space, and it's something fresh and new, not only upon entry, but throughout the experience, and also created energy as well. That was really important. As we look to the left, so I don't think we mentioned this, but so this new concept was a typical restaurant would be 4,500 square feet. This is now 3,500 square feet, and pretty much most of that reduction is in the dining room itself. So we went from 120 seats to 60, which is pretty dramatic. And I think as we went to the mock-up, there was a lot of eye-openers. It's one thing when you look at a plan and you actually go in there. So the challenge was, gone were the days of nooks and crannies where people would gather, but they still wanted something that felt a bit, warmer, cozier. And so playing with, materiality, variety of seating still, kind of scaping. And then, of course, I don't think it would be a Panera without a reimagined fireplace. So we have this kind of in the round experience built into this community table. But probably the star of the show is on the right-hand side where we brought the bakery and really made that a part of the journey, made it an important piece. One of our favorite moments was the mirror, actually. So when we mock that up in the mock-up space, it was getting that angle just right. So it actually reflects the abundance of the bakery throughout any place in the dining room. So as you're sitting down, you can really see, all of the gorgeous bakery items.
And the mirror is really an amplifier for us. And it's less about feeling and seeing it and having the impression when you're at the case, and it's more about, you've placed your order, you're eating your salad or whatever, thing it is you decided to be good, and then you're sitting there and you're staring at that cookie because that's what you see. And, time and time again, we've seen that's what's happened. People have watched everything move around the case and they're like, oh, God, I gotta go get a cookie. And that's what happens. So I think for us, one of the other big changes was, so many people still don't realize that Panera is a bakery and operates like a traditional bakery. Everything on the menu, all the baked products, all the bread that the sandwiches are on, all baked on site. And part of this redesign was not only bringing those ovens forward and just that whole baking area forward, which had been kind of squirreled away and nicely hidden in back before, but we also changed the whole operations of how the baking procedures happen. So instead of doing third shift baking overnight like the rest of the industry does, we started doing day baking. And it allowed us some really interesting opportunities because you can put on the wall in the biggest font ever, hey, we bake everything fresh every day. And it's never going to really say as much as actually just showing it. So I think this is one of the best and biggest for us perception changes of anything that's happening in the space. And we rethought everything. Not only was it the position of the ovens, but we consolidated all of the product into a single bakery case. It had previously been in a back wall and in a cart over here, and you couldn't tell how much stuff we actually baked. You put it in a singular case, and then, of course, as we said earlier, march everybody past it, and you can't miss it.
Yeah. And I would say to that too, that building in flexibility before there was the wall, it was out front, and that case may look amazing, in the morning, but afternoon, it was looking pretty sparse. And so building in the flexibility that you can, it can get smaller, but it still felt abundant and something that I don't want to get that last loaf of bread or that last cookie. You want it to feel like it's impactful. So as we mentioned, Panera was they were prioritizing convenience long before the pandemic. We see consumers are, in 2019 alone, off-premise sales increased 4 times faster than dine-in, and that was 80% of growth in the 3 years prior to the pandemic. So obviously, the writing was on the wall, and I think a lot of brands were pretty reactionary to the pandemic and looking, okay, well, what's next, and doubling down on frictionless. Quite frankly, one of the things that we talk about internally at ChangeUp is this idea of frictionless when combined with contactless equals experienceless, and I think frictionless has become quite the buzzword over the past couple years. And while removing some of that friction, I think, is necessary to a good experience, we have to be careful that we don't take out all of the friction, because I think we believe that there is good friction, one that leaves stickiness to the experience, that maybe I think creates those memorable moments. And so again, going back with Panera, we wanted to make sure that there is some sort of contact that, and a drive-thru, quite frankly, was not going to just deliver that. So we do have a drive-thru, though. And it has all of the things that you would imagine. We again tried to create a similar experience as you're coming from that entry point into the dining room. We have the digital menu boards at the drive-thru, and a rapid pickup only lane as well. But I think, again, that's table stakes anymore, and it's definitely something that Panera was already exploring. Really, we needed to bring in, a better technology in order to deliver on true convenience. So really taking that beyond the drive-thru. Obviously, we're all just, a few clicks away from a meal, and we don't, expect that to slow down anytime soon. We've got revenue at base food orders is expected to increase by 62% by 2025. So obviously, technology was the other piece of the puzzle.
And really, for Panera, it's huge. So our loyalty members make up over half of all of our orders. So when we really thought about how to integrate and amp up our drive-thru experience, and for us, it's rapid pickup, which is our version of order ahead. That was at the center of a lot of our exterior improvements. So we implemented digital menu boards. When we throw geofencing into it, we're able to recognize our loyalty members as they come in, make suggestive selling, really make that connection, even though you're in the drive-thru.
Exactly. Yeah. So even as you're going and pulling up to the lane, it actually, with the geofencing, can pull up your order. You don't even need to tell them, and provide more of that personalized experience, even though it's contactless. So I think we feel like we've built for change, built for the future, created something that is definitely uniquely Panera, and ultimately optimized for now, I would say, on convenience. We've talked about it, what's ahead, who knows, but we have to constantly be innovating and figuring out, well, what are we going to do next? And it's not a one and done situation anymore.
We never stop innovating, and we're going to keep breaking the models. So.
Right? Yeah, exactly.
In fact, right before this, we were talking about what do we do next?
What do we do?
How are we going to break it next?
Exactly.
We haven't even talked about it publicly yet.
Yeah. So driving growth for I think both of us means you have to shift your perspective, and ultimately, what we want to be is leading the change and not reacting to it in the end. So that's it.
That's Panera. Thank you.